Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Leanna Senior Transition Support, specialists in downsizing and seniors residences.
Welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Matt Del Vecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing, and the senior living industry.
And I'm Corey Sirota, clinical social worker and psychotherapist, specializing in grief and loss.
You know, Corey, we're talking grandparenting on this half, and it's interesting how grandparenting has changed. You know, maybe it's just me, but growing up in the 60s and 70s, it always seemed that grandparents were considered older people.
Old. They were old.
Yeah, they were old. And yet you think of grandparents today and it's you don't think of it in the same way. So much more active.
Active for sure, going, doing, busy, yet still very involved, but just in a very different way. I tend to think grandparenting is very different today.
Absolutely it is.
The love of the grandchild, not at all, but the grandparenting itself, absolutely, which is why we thought this would be an interesting topic, and we're thrilled to invite and welcome Brisa Berkovitz. She's the founder of Magical Moments. She has a degree in special care counseling and early childhood development. She's worked as a child behavior consultant through the Early Years Child Behavior Certification Program. Brisa has also been teaching mom and taught classes for the past 20 years and opened her own school 5.5 years ago. She also works with special needs children and has done so for the past 30 years. We have her today on the line to talk about how grandparenting has changed over the past several years and also to offer some suggestions for creating the most positive grandparent-grandchild relationships possible. Welcome to the show, Brisa.
Thank you for inviting me onto the show this afternoon. I'm very excited to be here.
So, Brisa, how would you say, you heard us bantering about it a little bit, but how would you say grandparenting has changed in the past decade or so?
I think if you have to look back, at first, before we were industrialized, there were farmhouses in which there were lots of people taking care of the children. Then people moved to the city, into single homes. Now, some grandparents remained at home, but others, went to work. And as a matter of fact, today you still have many more grandparents who are still working full-time or part-time, which allows for a lot of flexibility. So some of them, some grandparents may choose to, do school activities, pick up their grandchildren, take them to programs, and as well, even have them in their homes part-time or full-time during the day so that their children can work. But we also need to recognize that, there are different cultures and there are different socioeconomic differences. And we have to respect that different people have different ideas and expectations regarding grandparenting.
It's so true. And as you're talking, students, younger students these days compared to the older days, there are so many more activities going on in the plays and the sports. We're talking, of course, in non-COVID times. Right. But as a result, the demand on the two-parent working family, all of a sudden the role of grandparents have increased. And some absolutely love it, Brisa, yet some find it very, very challenging. Why is that?
I think there's a few things. One, it's knowing what your role is and how far you get to stretch that role. Is it as a grandparent, a mentor, a teacher? And I think today we're starting to see that as grandparents are not able to physically be with their grandchildren the way they have been in the past because of COVID-19, and I think such as circumstances such as difficult divorces, remarriages, second families, and of course, really just geographic distances that cause infrequent contact. But today, I think one of the things we have to realize is that technology has allowed us to still stay connected, whether we're in the same city or living elsewhere. And, as grandparents, you just have to remember your heart is not distant. It's only your body. I also think that parents are having their children later. And becoming a grandparent is also occurring later. And you may not have the same energy level, the same tolerances, and you may, for that matter, be experiencing medical issues. And I think one of the other challenges that happens is that sometimes grandparents have to step in and become sole caregivers for, their children, grandchildren, and because their children can't raise them. But I want to emphasize that, grandparents and their children just need to work together in the best interest of their children, because we do learn from one generation to another, and we really do get better at it.
So true, so true. That's Brisa Berkovitz, founder of Magical Moments. She's talking to us about grandparenting your grandchildren and how how we navigate this. So I'm particularly interested in the challenge of respect around guidelines or directives from the parents, even if as a grandparent you don't agree with the no snack, no TV, no this, no that, whatever it is. How do you do that?
Well, I think from day one, it really is important to follow the guidelines and the boundaries and the limits set by your children. We need to respect what they ask of us and the parenting decisions children make for our grandkids. It doesn't prove to be easy. You've been, as grandparents, you've already been through this, and you pretty well think you know better than they do. But I think if there's an issue, I think that there's a right time. You can have the discussion, you can share what your thoughts are, but not in front of children. And I think one of the other parts is we've already raised our children, and we need to give our children a chance to raise their children. And as grandparents, be there when they ask us for wisdom. I would definitely say, try not to say, well, I did it this way. You're not doing it like that's the wrong way. We need to learn to keep our opinions to ourselves and only offer an opinion or an advice. And I really emphasize only if we are asked. At times, much easier said than done. But you know what? Whatever the circumstances are as grandparents, your love and your genuine concern for your grandchild's safety and well-being comes from your heart. And I think that's the part we just need to understand. We need to work together.
Working together is right. You're with Matt and Corey here on Life Unrehearsed, and we're talking with the founder of Magical Moments, Brissa Berkovitz, about the changing role of grandparents. Okay, Brissa, we're going to dig a little deeper here, and you're the grandparent, and you've raised your daughter, and you have a great relationship, and now the son-in-law is involved, and the dynamics start to change when it comes to, I guess, how you have to deal with the son-in-law versus dealing with your daughter. And it's not always easy, isn't it?
No, and I think first and foremost as grandparents, we need to respect all of our children, daughters, sons, daughter-in-laws, son-in-laws, because they are the parents of your grandchildren. And as grandparents, if we're going to interfere in issues that don't directly involve us, or treat their children in a way that they can be interpreted as not being equal, it causes stress between siblings, in-laws, and between marriages. Really, I think our role as parents is to preserve our children's marriages and encourage open lines of positive communication between one another. And I think one thing that we do have to realize is if there is a fallout, the only people that are going to be involved get hurt are our grandchildren, because at 10 times they are placed directly in the line of fire as pawns or as leverage. So if you have an issue with one of your children, go directly to the person. See if you can find a way to resolve the issue one-on-one and not involve others.
Very wise advice. So quick question before we go out to traffic, because we do have to take a traffic update, but is there such a thing as spoiling your grandchild? Oh, did we lose her?
I think we might have. Oh, there you are. You there, Brissa?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You know what? Honestly, nope. In my personal opinion, absolutely not. It is not. You can't spoil your grandchildren. I think that what happens is that, you do what you want. You want to create lifelong memories. I think it is the perks of being a grandparent. But I think as grandparents with their children, there needs to be a little bit of a leeway, because a grandparent and grandchild relationship is quite unique and very different. The only thing I'd say, 3 little quick tidbits. It's so tempting to buy everything, every toy, but check with the parents first before you buy more. Be aware of overindulging or giving an abundance of attention for the first grandchildren, because as time passes, you might burn out and have a lack of time as other children come along. And I think the biggest important rule is, remember the rule of thumb, that whatever you do for your first grandchild, you will set a precedent that you will need to repeat for every other grandchild.
So set the bar medium low at the beginning there, Corey. Brissa Berkovitz, we're going to come right back with you. And the role of babysitting is obviously an important role for grandparents. It has changed, obviously, during this pandemic, and we want to get your take on that.
Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Caregiver Crosswalk, Dementia Care Consulting. Never roam alone.
Welcome back. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corey Sirota, along with my co-host Matt Del Vecchio. And we're listening to a little Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. We are talking with Brisa Berkovich from Magical Moments about grandparenting your grandchild. And you are just chock full of unbelievably helpful advice. So let me just throw this one out at you as well. Mm-hmm. It's a tough time, COVID. We can't exactly have access to each other in the same way we used to, but are there ways grandparents can help babysit?
You know, I think that there's different opportunities. I mean, we know that babysitting is really not an obligation. It's something that you want to do, and it shouldn't be expected. You know, it's spending quality time with your grandchildren, and it really is a privilege, and it's a way to stay connected and bonded, as I said. Mm-hmm. But we also need to respect and not judge and appreciate that some of the grandparents may feel nervous, fearful, and unsure, and they may not want to babysit. It does take a village to raise a child, and we can all care and love and contribute to the well-being of children. And I think that what we can do is you can read stories, you can go on to Zoom, you can go on to FaceTime, you can go on to Messenger. Give grandparents the opportunity with technology to be able to spend that time. Parents are very nervous, grandparents are very nervous about being with grandchildren that might be in daycare and elementary school. And so, you know, unless they need to be the primary caretaker because mom and dad have no other option, then, you know, grandparents can play a significant role. They are an important role in our children's lives. And, you know, with or without COVID, I think there are many opportunities. They can, you know, sing songs with them. They can expose them to a variety of genres that they enjoy, create special games, share their passions, share, you know, just different things. Maybe there's a way that they can link up, you know, and possibly watch a movie together or be watching the same thing and giggling and sharing things that you enjoy.
It is so true, Brisa, as you're talking to about this. There are some grandparents that are absolutely embracing the video conferencing. Others I've heard, and I work in the seniors world, they're just not, they're technically challenged. And so what better person to get you all set up in technology than your own grandchildren, you know? But we're in this era. And switching gears on a very important and difficult topic, and this is probably along the lines of, we'll say, more in our normal non-COVID days, is the topic of discipline. And you know, what are some of the tips and techniques, Brisa, that you would suggest for grandparents concerning discipline?
You know, I think there's the first question, really, I think, is you have to ask is a grandparent, as a grandparent, do you have permission to discipline your grandchildren? And there are tools in your pocket that you can use, and I can use them for parents as well as provide grandparents, you know, promoting really good cooperation. And I think, you know, if you focus on the positive and we focus on improvements and we catch them doing good, in other words, you want to be firm and fair and you want to celebrate the little victories instead of focusing on what they didn't do, focus on what they did do. Because as we know, success begets success. You know, and I think one thing that's really important, if there is a lack of rules and boundaries and you give in to every single desire of your grandchildren's heart, you may end up making the job of their parents much more difficult. And it's really important to be on the same page with the parents as much as possible. You also want to be able to understand children according to their ages and stages of development and don't have higher expectations, you know, by their developmental needs. You know, and it's very simple. You know, when you tell a child what they can't do, tell them what they can do. So, you know, like, you cannot jump on the couch. You can jump on the floor. You know, teach and model what your expectations are when your grandchildren visit. That's really important. Some grandparents may have the expectation that as soon as your grandchildren come in, they should give them a kiss, they should give them a hug. Well, then teach that and model that expectation. Don't assume that they will just automatically do it. And you know, teaching is we want things to become intrinsic, and we don't want it to become extrinsic. You want to be able to give them choices, and you want to stay away from the Band-Aid solutions, as tempting as they are, because if you do this, I'll give you that. It's kind of like a bribe. And I think one of the most important things that grandparents need to do is it's important to say what you mean what you say, and follow through, because consistency builds trust. And you try not to make the empty promises, because children learn you cannot be counted on.
I think that advice is so relevant for both grandparents and for parents who are listening as well. I want to thank you so much. That's Brisa Berkovich, founder and owner of Magical Moments. Brisa, thank you for your time, your words of advice. How do people reach out to you if they want to get more information?
They can always go to my web, brisasmagicalmoments.com, or they can email at me at brisa@brisasmagicalmoments.com. And if I can just say one quick thing, sit back, grandparents, encourage your parents, love, 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 love your grandchildren, and enjoy every single magical moment.
Words of advice, Brisa. Thank you. I would encourage you to Brisa's Magical Moments. That's you do so much more than just grandparenting, mom and tots, and 30 plus years with this, Brisa. So thank you. Wonderful words of advice, and we appreciate you taking some time on a Sunday here. All right, Corey, what do we have on the next week?
Zelda Fritas, we need to know about navigating our healthcare system.
And believe it or not, our next show will be November 1st, Sunday, November, and that's Movember. It's coming up next month. And we're going to hear from Matt Dubé. Matt is the spokesperson for Movember Quebec, and we're going to hear what he has to say about how they are changing the face of men's health. And we want to do a little shout out to our technical producer, Dave Simon. Thank you very much for all your help with the show. And you can catch Life Unrehearsed every Sunday at 4 p.m. on CJD 800.